Imagine this. You wake up one morning in the life you once prayed for. The job you wanted is yours, the relationship you dreamed of lies peacefully beside you. The bank account no longer groans with emptiness. You sip your favorite coffee scroll through a world that on the surface affirms you have made it. Yet as the sun spills across the room, a strange hollowness whispers beneath the perfection. A question gnaws quietly. Why doesn't it feel the way I thought it would? It is a paradox as old as human striving. Happiness arrives, but the ecstasy you imagine dissolves quickly into a kind of muted numbness. You thought joy would roar through your veins, that you would finally feel whole. Yet instead you feel the eerie silence of anticlimax. Why does the arrival at enough so often taste like nothing at all? Why does the summit of your mountain sometimes reveal not triumph, but an abyss? You've been told your entire life that happiness is the ultimate goal, the golden key. Every advertisement, every piece of advice, from well-meaning voices, every cultural script insists that if you chase the right dreams, love the right person, buy the right things, you will arrive at lasting fulfillment. Yet what happens when you follow the script to the letter and still find yourself unsettled, haunted by a strange emptiness? Is it possible that what we call happiness has always been a mirage, shimmering from a distance but dissolving upon arrival? Consider this unsettling thought. Perhaps it is not failure that terrifies us most, but success. Failure can be blamed on external forces, on timing, on bad luck. But success, when it finally lands and still leaves you yearning, exposes a far more existential problem. What if the very way we define happiness is flawed? What if the promises whispered by society, philosophy, even psychology have led us astray? You can ignore it for a while, drown it in distractions, or numb it with another purchase, another achievement, another fleeting high. But the echo persists. Why, after reaching happiness, do I feel so strangely empty? That question is the crack in the facade, the quiet tremor before an earthquake. And if you follow it, truly follow it, it will unravel. Not just your assumptions about happiness, but your entire understanding of what it means to live. This is where the descent begins, into the hidden problem buried beneath the glittering surface of joy. The emptiness you feel when happiness finally arrives is not an accident. It is the symptom of a deeper structure, an architecture of desire built into the human psyche and reinforced by the culture around you. To understand it, you must look beneath the surface where psychology and philosophy converge on an unsettling truth. Happiness, as we commonly define it, is built on sand. Carl Jung once warned that modern man is poor in symbols. By this he meant that the stories we once used to anchor our lives, myths, rituals, spiritual archetypes, have been eroded by materialism and rationalism. What remains is a culture that teaches you to chase external markers of worth, yet fails to offer an inner compass. So you keep climbing ladders, unaware that they lean against walls that may lead nowhere. Is it any wonder that when you grasp the prize, it slips through your fingers like smoke? Nietzsche too understood this trap. He declared that when a society worships comfort and pleasure as its highest gods, it produces what he called the last man, a creature who seeks only ease, who avoids suffering at all costs, who confuses fleeting satisfaction with a meaningful life. But the last man is hollow because his existence is stripped of struggle, transcendence, and the creative fire that gives life its intensity. In this sense, your emptiness is not a personal failure. It is the predictable outcome of living in a world that mistakes comfort for purpose. Schopenhauer went even further, describing life as an endless oscillation between desire and boredom. When you want something, you suffer in the not having. When you achieve it, you suffer in the anticlimax. This pendulum swing keeps you restless, never arriving at the permanent happiness you were promised. It is the nature of desire itself to renew endlessly, to tease you with the illusion of finality, while ensuring that satisfaction never lasts. And yet the machinery of modern society exploits this cycle. Advertising, social media, even well-meaning teachers and parents feed you the script of happiness as acquisition. More success, more recognition, more possessions. You inherit these definitions without questioning them, and when they fail you quietly blame yourself. But perhaps the problem is not you. Perhaps the problem is the very way happiness has been defined and sold to you. This is the hidden root, the psychological and philosophical seed from which emptiness grows. And like any seed, it bears fruit not just in your inner world, but in the structures of society itself. The hidden flaw in how happiness is defined does not remain quietly within your inner life. It leaks outward, reshaping entire societies in ways so subtle you barely notice. When happiness is equated with fleeting highs and external validation, human beings become perpetual seekers, restless consumers, endlessly unsatisfied. The emptiness you feel is multiplied across millions, producing a civilization addicted to chasing shadows. Neurology gives us a clue. Dopamine, the brain's chemical of pursuit, spikes, not when you have what you want, but when you are on the verge of getting it. The anticipation of reward is far more intoxicating than the reward itself. This means that your brain is wired to crave the chase, not the arrival. Once you finally possess the thing you longed for, dopamine falls and emptiness rushes in. But instead of seeing this as a structural illusion, society trains you to interpret the fall as personal failure. The result, you begin chasing harder, deeper, faster, another promotion, another relationship, another distraction. This endless chase shapes culture itself. Entire economies thrive on your dissatisfaction. If happiness were permanent, advertising would collapse overnight, consumerism would grind to a halt, and much of modern capitalism would lose its fuel. So the system depends on your hunger never being truly satisfied. The emptiness of happiness is not just an accident, it is engineered, exploited, and amplified. Psychologically, this produces consequences you may already recognize: anxiety from the fear of losing what you have, depression from realizing achievement feels hollow, addiction to substances, screens, or status symbols that briefly mimic meaning, relationships reduced to transactions where even intimacy becomes another currency of self-validation. You might smile in photographs, but beneath the surface lies a quiet despair. The sense that you are living in a world that gives you everything except the one thing that matters. Philosophically, the stakes are even greater. When a society builds itself on shallow definitions of happiness, it produces fragile individuals, unprepared for suffering, unable to endure tragedy, and ill-equipped to face death. The human spirit atrophies. The very struggles that once gave depth to existence are anesthetized, leaving behind a collective shallowness. This is the unseen consequence: an entire civilization living in quiet desperation, mistaking stimulation for fulfillment, mistaking comfort for purpose. And unless you recognize the trap, you remain ensnared, living a life that appears full on the surface, yet feels empty at its core. But the story does not end here. For where there is a trap, there is also the possibility of rebellion. What if the very pursuit of happiness has been the problem all along? Imagine pausing in the middle of the race, standing still while everyone else rushes past you, their faces strained with the hunger for more. At first it feels terrifying. You are stepping outside the script, refusing the chase. But then a strange calm begins to settle in. This is the first step of rebellion, to stop confusing happiness with accumulation, and to begin seeing it as something deeper, quieter, and more enduring. Breaking free requires dismantling the illusions you've been fed since childhood. Consider the radical words of Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps and emerged with this revelation: happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue. In other words, happiness is not something you can grasp like a trophy. It emerges naturally when you dedicate yourself to meaning, when your life is aligned with something greater than yourself. The rebellion then is to stop asking, "What will make me happy?" and start asking, "What makes my life meaningful?" Nietzsche's answer was even sharper. He urged us to embrace suffering, to say yes to life not only in its pleasures, but also in its pain. For him, freedom lay in the ability to transform even tragedy into fuel for growth. By facing hardship instead of fleeing from it, you tap into a reservoir of strength that shallow happiness can never provide. This is not the easy path of comfort, it is the fierce path of self-overcoming. History gives us examples of those who chose rebellion over illusion. The Stoics of ancient Rome, who trained themselves to find peace, not in what they owned, but in how they responded to fate. Mystics and poets who stepped away from wealth and recognition to encounter truth in silence. Even modern revolutionaries of the spirit, artists, thinkers, visionaries who rejected the script of shallow success to live in alignment with something transcendent. To rebel is not to abandon joy. It is to discover a joy that no longer depends on fragile circumstances. It is to reclaim your agency from a system that profits on your emptiness. It is to cultivate resilience, purpose, and depth in a world that wants you distracted, docile, and endlessly consuming. And yet rebellion is only the beginning. For beyond the act of breaking free lies an even greater realization. One that does not merely redefine happiness, but redefines reality itself. Imagine standing at the edge of everything you once believed, looking down into the abyss, where the promise of happiness used to live. It is here in the silence after rebellion that the ultimate truth begins to reveal itself. Happiness was never meant to be the goal. It was the byproduct, the shadow cast by something far greater. When you chase the shadow, it slips through your fingers. But when you turn toward the source, the fire of meaning, the mystery of being, you discover something that cannot be taken away. The emptiness you once feared is not a flaw. It is an invitation. It is the space in which you can finally see that life was never about constant euphoria, but about depth, intensity, and presence. Happiness fades because it is not designed to hold the weight of existence. Meaning, however, can. To live for meaning is to anchor yourself in something larger than your shifting moods, a cause, a creation, a love that endures beyond pleasure. This realization reframes everything. You no longer need to panic when joy slips away because you understand it was never meant to stay. You no longer need to fear suffering because suffering too becomes part of the tapestry of a meaningful life. In this way, emptiness transforms into a teacher, revealing that the true measure of life is not, was I happy, but did I live fully? Did I love deeply? Did I serve something greater than myself? Philosophers and mystics across centuries converge here. The Buddhists call it the release from attachment. Frankl called it the discovery of meaning. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole. Different names. One truth, the point of life, is not to chase perpetual happiness, but to awaken to the fullness of being with all its light and all its shadow. And so the final paradox is this. The moment you stop worshiping happiness, you begin to experience a joy deeper than happiness could ever offer. A joy that does not vanish with circumstance, a joy that arises from living in truth. Now the question turns back to you. Will you keep chasing the shimmering illusion of happiness? Or will you dare to step into the deeper fire of meaning? The answer will not just change how you feel. It will change how you live, and perhaps how you die.